The United States company Chevron will resume operations in Venezuela after an easing of the U.S. blockade against his country's oil industry. Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed creating a gas union with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to establish mechanisms to ship natural gas in the region. And the former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin died on Wednesday at the age of 96. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. On Tuesday, Venezuela's Petroleum Minister, Tarek El-Aizami, announced that the U.S. company Chevron will resume operations in Venezuela after an easing of the U.S. blockade against his country's oil industry. This special license allows access for Venezuelan production to the U.S., a country that is the world's second-largest oil importer after China, and production will be carried out through Petropiar, Petroboscan, Petroindependencia, and Petroindependiente, which are four joint ventures of Chevron and the state-owned company Petróleos de Venezuela, PDVSA. The special license was announced shortly after the signing of the second partial agreement reached between the Bolivarian government and the unitary platform in Mexico on November 26. The current international scenario has enabled direct rapprochement between Venezuela and the U.S. A precedent of this bilateral approach was the meeting between Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro Moros and a delegation sent by the U.S. President Joe Biden in March. A group of 67 Peruvian lawmakers presented a new motion of vacancy against President Pedro Castillo. According to local media, the parliamentarians appealed to the constitutional cause of permanent moral incapacity to hold office. The request will be formally sent to the head of the state to be later voted in the plenary, where, in order to pass, will need 52 votes in favor. In this, the third impeachment request the Congress files against Pedro Castillo. The first one was presented in 2021, followed by another in January 2022. In Ecuador, President Guillermo Lasso, signed a decree calling for a referendum on 8 issues concerning security, institutions, and environmental protection. Following the president's signature, the National Electoral Council has 15 days to call for elections. If the electoral authorities pass the referendum, it will be held in February 2023, coinciding with sectional elections, which have already been called on by the Electoral Council. The questions to be included in this referendum had been validated by the Constitutional Court prior to the president's signature. In Bolivia, the Senate fully endorsed the law on the national census, a regulation that will implement the results of the population and housing census for the redistribution of economic resources and legislative seats according to population numbers. After a 4-hour session, 22 of the 36 senators approved the text. The law, which had already received half approval in the Chamber of Deputies, was now sent to the executive for its approval. Additionally, the National Institute of Statistics will send to the Supreme Electoral Court the official data of the census for the drafting of the Bill of Seat Distribution, according to the articles of the political constitution of the state and the electoral legislation in force, which will be implemented in the country's next general elections. Thousands of Haitians protested on Port-au-Prince today against the massive deportations they suffer in the neighboring Dominican Republic and denounced abuses against women and children. The demonstrators carried signs comparing Dominican President Luis Abinader to dictator Rafael Trujillo, responsible for the death of up to some 20,000 Haitians in 1937. They also questioned the alleged racial profiling the immigration authorities apply to their countrymen who are daily harassed everywhere they go just because of their skin color. More than 50,000 migrants have been returned from the Dominican Republic in the last 3 months, including 1,000 2,000 unaccompanied children, according to the National Immigration Office. However, Santo Domingo's authorities said deportations of undocumented migrants will continue and pointed out that their commitment is only to their own people. On Wednesday, November the 30th, Barbados celebrated its Independence Day. The day commemorates the island's country's independence from the United Kingdom in 1966. The important date is marked by the lighting of the Parliament buildings and office buildings throughout Bridgertown. Roundabouts of the highways of Barbados also are lit up, creating a spectacular view at night. This year, the president of the island nation, Sandra Mason, joined by members of the Defense and Armed Forces, arrived at Kensington Oval for the Independence Parade, an impressive show, pomp, and pageantry honoring the big event. Now we move on to other topics. Mexican health authorities confirmed the application of some 4 million doses of the anti-COVID Cuban vaccine Abdala. While presenting a report on COVID-19 pandemic in Mexico, Health Deputy Secretary Hugo López-Gatell confirmed the arrival of a Mexican Air Force plane on Saturday with a shipment of 4 million doses of vaccine from Havana. The federal official explained that they will be applied within the framework of reinforcement plans for the protection of the Mexican adult population. The country is currently registering an increase in the number of infections of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19. Let's take a short break now, but first, remember you can follow us on our TikTok account at TeleSUR English, in which you will be able to see news in different formats, news updates, and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In the UK, postal workers at Royal Mail have begun a fresh 48-hour strike in a row for per-end conditions. It is the latest in a series of walkouts involving more than 100,000 workers and will hit deliveries across the United Kingdom. The Communication Workers Union, which represents the workers, demanded a pay rise that matches the soaring cost of living. The dispute began this summer after Royal Mail rejected union demands for a pay rise to cope with inflation, the rate at which prices rises, which is currently 11.1%. Postal workers walked out on Thursday and Friday last week, and another wave of strikes is planned in the run-up to Christmas on December the 9th, 11th, 14th, 15th, 23rd, and 24th. European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde reiterated the central bank's determination to fight record high inflation, noted that the institution will continue to raise interest rates even as the economy weakens. Lagarde stated before the European Parliament at a meeting on monetary policy that the inflation of the Eurozone had not yet peaked because of too much uncertainties. The former managing director of the International Monetary Fund also said that affected by tighter financial conditions and weak global demands, the economy of the Eurozone was expected to continue to weaken for the rest of this year and in the early 2023. According to the European Union Statistics Office, the inflation of the Eurozone hit a record high of 10.6% in October. Rocketing energy bills are forcing Hungary to close libraries, theaters, swimming pools, and even its new football stadiums for winter. The state-of-the-art grounds are among a long list of buildings no longer able to cope with rising energy prices in the Central European country. Despite being one of the country's richest cities, Székesfehérvár is one of mainly closing its museums, libraries and theaters. According to experts, other cities, particularly in the poorer eastern regions, are threatened with bankruptcy unless they get state support. The energy crisis, an effect from the conflict in Ukraine, has piled pressure on Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who has made low household utility bills a core policy over the last decade. Now we address other topics. The United Nations World Meteorological Organization said all regions of the world saw water extremes last year, both floods and droughts, in its first annual State of Global Water. The report assesses the effects of changes in climate, environment, and society on the Earth's freshwater resources' limited supplies that are under increasing demand in order to better manage them. Some 3.6 billion people face inadequate access to fresh water at least 1 month a year. This figure is projected to rise to more than 5 billion by 2050. According to UN studies, between 2001 and 2018, 74% of all natural disasters were water-related. Unprecedented flooding occurred in Western Europe and the Amazon, while water levels in rivers in Paraguay and southern Brazil dropped to an all-time low. On Saturday, firefighter search teams dug through mud and debris on the Italian island of Ischia as they hunt for more people still missing after a landslide. 8 people have been found dead, among them a 3-week-old infant and his parents. Exceptionally heavy rain caused a fragment of Monte Pomio to collapse, gaining speed as it precipitated onto the town of Casamicciola, where it demolished buildings and carried vehicles into the sea. Mud and water flooded some 30 houses, and more than 200 residents in the town of 8,300 remain homeless. Geologists have pointed out to a pattern of construction that interferes with natural water runoffs of this volcanic mountain island that is susceptible to both landslides and earthquakes. Russian President Vladimir Putin proposed creating a gas union with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to establish a mechanism to ship natural gas between the 3 countries and to other nations, including China. The 2 major economies of the Central Asian region share a gas pipeline to Russia and a pipeline transporting natural gas from Turkmenistan to China. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov confirmed the proposal was being discussed between the 3 nations because there was a need for synchronization since they all sell natural gas. The news came a day after Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said he had talks with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin in Moscow on the issue. And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Former Chinese leader Jiang Zemin, who steered the country through a transformation era from the late 1980s and into the new millennium, died on Wednesday at the age of 96. Jiang Zemin passed away due to leukemia and multiple organ failure in Shanghai. His death was announced in a letter expressing profound grief addressed to the whole Communist Party, military, and Chinese people. When Jiang replaced Deng Xiaoping as leader in 1989, China was still in the early stages of economic modernization. By the time he retired as president in 2003, the Asian giant was a member of the World Trade Organization. Beijing had secured the 2008 Olympics, and the country was well on its way to superpower status. A suicide bombing in Pakistan's Balochistan province on Wednesday killed 3 people and injured 23 others. According to local authorities, the suicide bomber blew himself near a police truck in Balochistan's Keras Balay area. The truck was carrying security personnel to protect polio workers at an ongoing vaccination drive. Kera Deputy Inspector General of Police Ghulam Asfar Maherzar confirmed the attack and said that 20 policemen were injured by the attacker. Australia's Parliament on Wednesday censured former Prime Minister Scott Morrison for secretly appointing himself to 5 ministries during the COVID-19 pandemic. By a vote of 86 to 50, Parliament said that Morrison's actions had undermined democratic principles and made proper accountability impossible. However, the motion is not legally binding, but rather symbolic. The former Prime Minister took over the Ministries of Health, Finance, Interior, Treasury and Industry, Science, Energy and Resources between March 2020 and May 2021, during the health crisis without notifying Parliament. This is the first time in Australia's history that the House of Representatives has formally censored a former Prime Minister.
A censure motion like this is as rare as it is grave. The fact that it has become so necessary constitutes a profoundly sad moment in the life of our national parliament. But to ignore it would be to be complicit in saying, well, that was okay.
In this context, former Prime Minister Scott Morrison defended his actions before Parliament and accused the government of Anthony Albanese of political intimidation.
I have no intention now, Mr Speaker, of submitting to the political intimidation of this government using its numbers in this place to impose its retribution on a political opponent. Yeah.
And for the first time in the history, a woman will referee a World Cup match, no other than the one between Germany and Costa Rica, to be played on December the 1st. On Tuesday, FIFA announced French Stéphanie Frappart will become the pioneer for women referees. She will work on Group E match between Germany and Costa Rica on Thursday. Stéphanie Frappart will have assistant referees Nusa Bak and Karen Diaz by her side. This is not the first time Frappart, one of the 3 women referees in Qatar 2022 World Cup, has made history in high-level men matches. In 2009, she was chosen to referee the UEFA Super Cup clash between Liverpool and Chelsea. And just as the hearts of millions of fans live the emotions of the Qatar 2022 World Cup, TeleSUR joins this sporting event with From the Field, a show that brings news, analysis, reviews and more to our audience. Don't miss it. Our show airs 1 p.m. local time in Caracas and 12 p.m. New York. Remember, From the Field only on TeleSUR. And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.